So yeah, so today we're going to be looking specifically at the processes for ESG integration, which we typically use for startups that we work with. And just like if you're following the course so far, the focus for us has been on how do we ensure that environmental consideration is a critical component of decision making in a startup, in a business. How do we also factor in the social and governance aspect of our business as well, right? So the process we've developed as Climatr also is really based on these three major pillars, which is environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and also governance sustainability. And for us, the goal was to be able to identify risk factors as well as opportunities across these three major pillars, the environmental, social, and governance side, as relates to a business. And we developed a process that allows us to ensure that we don't make this like a generalized kind of thing, but following a couple of standards, and we use that to develop something that ensures that we're developing a robust and tailored approach for the companies we work with. Let's take a deeper dive into what this looks like. So for us, we like to start or begin the process with stakeholder analysis. So it's important that while commencing on laying the foundations for ESG for your business, it's important to consider what your stakeholders, your different stakeholder groups would be interested in as when it comes to those conversations around ESG and the likes, right? So for us, one thing we do is we get started with stakeholder analysis. We first of all understand the different stakeholder groups of a particular business that we're working with. And once we have an understanding of what that looks like, we proceed on to carry out some tailored sessions with each of these stakeholder groups. It's important we understand what they know. It's also important to also understand what they think it's very important for them when it comes to these topics around ESG, and also factor that in across which of them are risks and which of them are opportunities. So that's one reason why we embark on the stakeholder analysis aspect. So and more importantly, it's not just having it written on paper. It's also important that we have these conversations with these stakeholders because at the end of the day, they are the human interface that would also execute on this set of objectives. So at the same time, it's important to have more or less like their buy-in, to get their buy-in on these topics as relates to a business, and then use that to tailor and to develop an objective that really works for everyone. So what you don't want to do is to develop a policy, an ESG policy or an ESG objective or roadmap for your company, and it's being fought against by different stakeholders in the group. So starting with stakeholder engagement, it's more like the right foundation to get started so that your stakeholders are aware that you're thinking in this direction. So even if there is already a risk that's already affecting the business or damaging the brand and the likes, engaging the stakeholders head on helps them understand that you are thinking about these problems and are doing something to address it. So that can help to pacify the tensions that might arise as a result. And also importantly, it also ensures that once you have your objectives and roadmap figured out, you've designed the entire process, and you've designed the entire objectives for your organization, bringing it back to the different stakeholders, it won't look all new to them. It's something they would feel like, yes, we are part of the development of this process. And then that helps to ensure that at the end of the day, enforcement, which is a critical component of having an ESG roadmap, having an ESG goal, is actually executed at the end of the day. So we begin with this, trying to understand the different needs of the stakeholder groups, and then use that to classify which of them are risks and then which of them are opportunities. Then once we're done with this assessment, the next process we take is we embark on what we call a materiality assessment. So this materiality assessment is a very critical aspect in that helps also tailor down, given to tailor down what are the risks and opportunities that are inherent with different business model, details and the likes. But typically how we work is we take what we've gotten from the stakeholder analysis, we keep that on the side, we conduct our materiality assessments, which helps us to consider critically across three different categories: the environmental side of things, social side of things, and governance side of things. So we run an assessment that allows us to identify risks. What are the environmental risks to this business? So it's very specific to the type of business, the sector. It's also very specific to the industry as well, right? And also geography as well. So we put all these things into consideration and use that to create, at the end of the day, what we call, to create what we call a materiality map. So this materiality maps is inclusive, not just what we've identified as per the industry, the sector, the business model, the geography, but also it includes what the assessments we've gotten from different stakeholders we already discussed with, prior to the materiality assessment test. So once we conduct that aspect, we use that to create what we call a materiality map that allows you as a business to see, hey, these are the risk factors, across the different pillars of ESG. These are the risk factors that our business is prone to. And then it helps. What it does at the end of the day is it helps you as a business to begin to plan ahead. How do you mitigate and plan ahead against these identified risks? At some point in the presentation, I'm going to show us just a sample of what that looks like for those of us that have not seen a materiality map before. But before that, there's a brief assessment we would like to conduct. We would write on the chat box. He will drop a link. It's a link to a Google form. Kindly quickly fill that out as fast as you can. Should take a few minutes to do that. And so this is just to help you begin to, do something in terms of the first part we've discussed, the stakeholder analysis side, to help you map out and identify the different stakeholders you have. And also it will be very important for our post-training engagement, with each of you as well moving forward, right? So while we're on that, okay, Ben, is there any information you'd like to pass on at this point before I proceed?
Not really. Just only that we could probably give them 10 minutes to fill the form and then we can continue with the rest of the deliverables. Well, yes, check the chat box. I've dropped a link where everyone can access this Google form and get to fill in these questions. So whilst you're on the link, which I believe we all are, I'll just run you through what is needed, just like Area said. So you put your name, email address, name of your business, and the business sector you happen to play in. For some of us, we're in the agro supply space, the agribusiness space. Some were in the e-waste space. So whatever space or sector you play, you input that. And then the next question is more about your internal stakeholders, right? Do you currently have, not do you wish to have in the future, right? Do you only have employees? You pick employees only, but if you have employees and C-suites, more like CMO, CFO, COO, you can click both of them, employees and COO, and C-suites, right? If you happen to have all three, including board of directors, please feel free to click that as well. And if there are any other internal stakeholders that you do not know, feel free to highlight them in the next section, right? In the next space below. Again, here has given us understanding of who stakeholders are, right? Everybody internally that has to do with your business. They are your internal stakeholders. And just like the examples we've created here. Same applies for your external stakeholders. That ought to be corrected, not internal stakeholders now. Same applies for your external stakeholders. As much as you currently have, you can, get to click or select them, right? Oh, I think you can only select one at a time. Oh, I see. We didn't get that settings right. Let me see if I can quickly do that. Just give me a second. Do that.
So I think what we can do regarding this would be on the next section where we have the other external stakeholders, you can just type in which of these pre-mentioned suppliers.
I think they can.
Yeah, go.
If they reload their page, they should be able to click multiple options now. I just
so they have to. Okay.
Yes, once you reload the page, you should be able to click multiple options. So you can click yeah, every you can try to reload it on your side so that it refreshes, and you can even double click as many options so you can see.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
You can click multiple options now. If you're done filling the form, you can just signify in the chat box. Yes. And then the last question, what are the materiality issues that affect your external stakeholders? Right. It could be a supply chain problem. It could be a hike in price. High prices is affecting them. It could be, poor yield. Depends on your space or your sector. But given the fact that you get to engage your stakeholders on a daily basis, we would believe that you have a very good understanding about their pain points, right? So that is where you get to highlight some of the pain points that we've understood, that you now understand that they're having to go through, right? Just by virtue of relating with you as a business. So feel free to highlight as many as you can. If you have other comments, feel free to add other comments, and then we can submit. We should be able to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes. So by 3:30, we can continue with the rest of the presentation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute and speak so we can clarify. Thank you. So this is us as Climatr trying to walk the walk with you, if I can use that expression, right? Let you know about the practical steps involved in integrating ESG already, right? So if you were to consult us, for example, outside of this program, we will still do this same process, right? We will still go through this exact process with you. So yes, it makes a lot of sense that you also get to understand the preliminary procedures involved in integrating ESG, right? Having believed that you have been well equipped about ESG for the past 2 weeks. So, does anyone want to speak? Nobody? Okay. So 3 more minutes and then we can continue. 3 more minutes. And we shall continue. Okay, submissions are already coming in. Keep them coming. Keep them coming, guys. Again, if you're not clear, you can quickly clarify before we go ahead. Just let us know how we can help.
Okay, so I think majority of the folks should be wrapping up by now, so I'll just jump right back at the presentation. That's okay. So we can save time. Okay. So folks, so I've talked about the first process, which is stakeholder engagement, which is also something we have everyone right now working on. And we've also talked about the next step for us, which is the materiality assessment, where we use the information we've gathered from the stakeholder engagement analysis, plus some analysis we conduct internally using different frameworks. We're able to arrive at a final document called the materiality map that shows different risk factors across ESG that applies to a particular business. Then once we're done with that, we use those information to go on to create what we call an ESG policy and objective. So why is this important? This is very important because of as a business at this point, you must have understood and seen the different risk factors that is applicable to your business. And it makes sense to put in measures, to put in, to begin to do something about those risk factors. So, and one way to do that is to develop ESG policies and objectives that categorically states this is how we intend as an organization to address this risk factor or this issue, maybe be it on the social side, maybe pay inequality, for example. This is our objective. This is what we intend to do. We intend to do as a business to improve our the pay disparity in our organization, to improve it by X amount in X year, for example. So that becomes an objective, and then that can be fed into a policy, right? So the point is, we at this point of the process, what we now do is to gather, to identify all the risk factors that have been identified across the environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and then governance issues that is a threat to us as a business. Then we use that information to create an objective that is realistic and also time bound, right? So this is very important for us at this stage. And then we can also use that to touch base with the different stakeholders as well to see, to also get in their feedback, get their buy-in and all that. But more importantly, this is a very important. Have a pending scandal or a pending environmental issue are battling as an organization, or a social issue are battling as an organization. This also shows them, yeah, these are the steps we are taking, to ensure that we are working on this particular issue. So once we're done with that, it's important to create a monitoring and reporting system, because if you cannot measure it, you can't really monitor, you can't really gauge how we're doing, right? So the map, it helps us to see and also quantify, the threats, the different risks we've identified across the different. Is it affecting our stakeholders more than it's affecting us as a business? Is it affecting us more than is affecting our stakeholders? Like at the end of the day, we're able to quantify these different risk factors and then understand where we are at the moment. Then we use those information to create a reporting system that allows us to measure over time, the different risks that are defined, in order to communicate back to our stakeholders, hey, this is how we're performing across these factors. So for example, most organizations do a quarterly report, also a quarterly sustainability report. Some choose to, yearly sustainability report. Whichever way works for you. You can do that every month. You can do that in 3 months interval. You can do that, first half, second half. So whatever way, whichever approach works for you. The point is, at some point, you will need to, communicate your sustainability report, and what you're ideally going to be communicating to your stakeholders is how you're performing across these different risk factors that has been identified, right? So that way, if I am a customer or user of a product or a service, and I'm more concerned about eco-friendly products from you as a brand, and you're showing me that yes, this is how we've been able to address the issue of sustainable packaging. This is where we are, where we were, in the past, and then this is where we are today. It helps me to see and recognize and also appreciate the effort you're making as an organization. And then from what we've discussed in module 1 and 2, when we talked about how you impact your brand, how you does a lot of things that in terms of the return on sustainable investment, I mean, that begins to take shape at that point, right? So at the end of the day, we're able to show those our performance metrics, and also it's easily comparable now. And for some of us in the venture capital space that asked questions earlier on about how they can quantify and monitor and ensure that the startups are reporting what they need to report, this helps you. I mean, if you're following closely with what we're discussing, this process helps you to have something standardized, that at the end of the day you can easily monitor and see performance over time. Once we're done with that, we go on to designing what we call a performance or impact management system. This really helps to assist businesses in capturing the financial value of their ESG policy and objectives, but more importantly, how it relates to their business strategy, and also help where at the end of the process helps them to document lessons, document how the process has been, but more importantly, the goal is to help you have a way of scrutinizing your process to ensure that that you always upgrading, optimizing your process to suit and fit with your organizational culture and your organizational outlook at the end of the day, right? So, and this is very important for stakeholders as well as shareholders as well, because you can use that to also demonstrate your ESG track record as a firm. And once we're done with this process, the next thing which we now start to do, although a lot of organizations begin with this even before they start doing anything. So this is what we call the strategic communications, right? So why is this important? It's important that as an organization, your ESG policy, your ESG position is clearly, right? And this is where we are. If we've gotten to the point startup as a business, having gone through previous, you now have full information to really put there. It becomes much more strategic. So see what companies like Patagonia is doing. These guys have figured out the way to clearly communicate their ESG and translate as to it helps brand perception, right? So this becomes a very strategic, activity to carry out. So at this point, what some of the things we do is also, we review your websites, your communications on the website, your social handles, your, newsletter materials. We also review your pitch decks if you have different decks for different stakeholders, investors, sales deck, or whatever it is. We make sure that each of your communication materials captures your position as an organization effectively, that as well. So we review all these things and then ensure that you're properly positioned in terms of how you communicate what you're doing and how you communicate the metrics that is important for stakeholders to have. Then once we're done with all these activities, we move on to the retraining activities. So why is this? This is a very critical component, because it's not just enough for you as an organization to figure out a way to create your policy, your ESG policy, and your objectives. It's much more important that at the end of the day, like I hinted earlier on, that you are able to communicate, you're able to execute effectively you're able to execute effectively your ESG policies, of just executing, but there's also enforcement across different stakeholders. This takes time, and believe me, this is one of the most difficult area we've seen in the industry, So you have cases where companies, right, they have the whole United Nations SDG goals, pasted all over the place. There's so much information, so much talking, so much words on ESG and sustainability. When you get closer to them as a business, maybe you engage them as a customer, as a different stakeholder, you don't, there's a disconnect between what they are professing to be doing regarding ESG to what they're actually doing. So when we conducted research a couple of years back as to understand why is this happening across organizations, why is this happening across firms, we understood that there was a disconnect between the floor members. There's a disconnect between those that are actually supposed to be executing on goals and policy, which what the founders or visionaries of the business have already came up with as regards to their ESG goals and objectives. So this is why this step is a very important step. One key thing we do is we re-educate different stakeholders groups, the relevant different stakeholders group, from your investors group to your board members. The board members has to understand their role, to achieving whatever ESG objective and roadmap that you have as an organization. Because at the end of the day, enforcement, accountability really comes from that top. So we educate the board members and to help them understand and see their own role. So the goal is for everyone to see, hey, this is what I need to do as relative to my work or to function in this organization to ensure that we meet our goals as an ESG compliant company, essentially, right? So we educate the board members, we educate the suppliers, we educate everyone across the value chain, we educate even down to the employees, and one unique thing we do about that is, so at some point in the process, one of the things we come up with is we develop metrics that helps you monitor and track each of the identified risks. So those metrics is what we tailor down into operations for businesses, right? So that way is not, you're no longer greenwashing. So that approach has helped us to minimize the rate of greenwashing with the companies we work with. So it really ensures and helps that at the end of the day that ESG is a practical thing. So I can see how I'm on the customer service side. I can see how my job, my day-to-day functional activities is feeding back into its particular metrics we are monitoring on, let's say, the social aspect of our business, and that way it helps us to at the end of the day be able to, quantify what we're doing. So yeah, we educate every stakeholder group on across board, and then, to ensure that they are properly aligned to execute and implement the sustainable development goals and the objectives that have been identified. And happens to be this. And I think at this point, I will call on Kate to come and by the way, what we do, our process is also standardized. It's not, we work with different standards to make this, to ensure it's a standardized process as well. So over to you, Kate. Kindly walk us through the sustainability standards, if you may.
All right, thank you, Henry. Next. Okay, so we're talking about the sustainability standards now. So with ESG reports, sustainability reporting, we have to develop standards to be able to measure. They say what you don't measure, you can't manage. And, because sustainability reporting isn't as old as financial reporting, so we have several standards available for reporting. So there's an issue of uniformity, reliability, because there's so many standards. But some of the popular ones we have TCFD, GRI, and SASB. So I'll start with TCFD first. So TCFD is the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. It was set up in 2017 to focus on climate-related risks that affect businesses. So for now, most of the organizations that use the TCFD are mostly into the financial sector. So we can see the slide. It says TCFD was created to develop recommendations on types of information that companies should disclose to investors, lenders. Sorry, I can't see the slide anymore, Henry.
Oh, I don't know if it's oh, looks like
just
it's not.
Henry.
Yeah, let me
Yes.
share mine quickly. Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
Presenting. Okay, we should be good now.
All right. Thank you. So most, like I said, most of the organizations that use TCFD are those in the financial sector. We have countries now begin to mandate TCFD reporting, like we mentioned in the second module for those that were here. Countries like New Zealand, where it's been made a law from next year, they have to report. Canada is also beginning to, place reporting mandates as well. Even the US for TCFD. So we have assets managers and organizations into assets management. They have to report on TCFD for financial institutions that have over $1 billion in assets. So then TCFD, I don't know if some of us are familiar with the framework. It has the governance aspect. So it has like 3 circles, the governance aspect, and then we have the strategies, we have risk management, and we have the metrics at the very center. So we have the governance covering the way we have the sustainability mapping. So something like that, we have that for the TCFD. So for the governance is like the outer one. I guess I should have put a picture of that here, but I'll just go on to explain. So governance is like the organization's, the board's oversight, on how the organization is managing climate-related risks. So obviously, if you want to manage climate risk, or you want to set up a strategy, you want to set up a sustainability unit, or you want to report in your organization, you can't do anything without having buy-in from the governance of the organization, like at board level, because they are the major decision makers, right? So that's the aspect of the governance. So then strategies now focuses on how you assess the impacts which climate change will have on your organization. So then it also covers a scenario analysis. So we see at 2 degrees, what impact does it have on my business? What impact does climate change have on my business? So one thing I'm actually kind of biased towards the CFD because I really like it because it's futuristic. It helps you assess, okay, in 2050, what are the conditions that climate change will have on my business at 2 degrees in 2000, like that. So in that way, you can predict ahead and you can assess, you can prepare ahead, it makes you proactive. So for instance, in 2018, there was a drought in Europe. I guess some of us will be aware of that, the Rhine River. So that's really affected supply chain because, companies were not able to ship their goods to customers. So imagine if some of those organizations have been able to use the TCFD. It wasn't, okay, just TCFD just came at that time, that was 2018. But imagine if TCFD had been available for a longer time and they've been able to plan ahead, they've been able to assess or predict that by 2018 we'll have such issues. So how do we protect our business to such impact of climate change? Probably they'll have to maybe look for a new supply chain means to take on their products to their clients, their consumers. And then we look at the third one in the circle is the risk management. So after you've been able to assess through your strategies, you've been able to assess the impact that climate change has on your business, then you now look at how do I manage risk, So it's categorized into acute and chronic. So there are some impacts it might have. Let's say we have flooding issue. Sometimes it might be short term, probably just delayed activities in your business for a little bit. That's that's the acute risk. But if you're looking at chronic risk, there are some companies where a major flooding event totally affects their businesses, and then these days even insurance are beginning to ensure that you are doing sustainability reporting. So if you say that you don't have a sustainability strategy in place, they don't provide insurance for your business when you're posed with such risk. So that's going to result in a total damage in your business, obviously. So that's a chronic risk. So then we look at the third one in the circle is the metrics. So now you've assessed your risk, you've looked decided, okay, this is the impact it will have on my business. How do I manage this? So metrics now looks at what are the kind of targets I can set, what policies can I put in place to be able to ensure that the risks identified can be prevented. And then also for opportunities as well that you can buy into. And then metrics also look, that's targets and metrics. Metrics also looks at your disclosures. So you have your scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. So we are all aware that scope 3 is the one that is like a major blind spot for organizations, because that's like outside your immediate value chain. So it's the one that you don't really have so much influence over. So you also have to disclose on that for your TCFD. So you can see that TCFD is quite integrated. It has a lot of factors that you have to consider, but it's mostly focused on climate change impact. And then we move on to GRI. So GRI is like the oldest ones among the reporting standards. So it enables companies and organizations to report on the economic, environmental, social, and governance performance. So GRI, like I said, is the oldest. So most of the new standards kind of like had that as a foundation, and then they built up on that. So GRI, it's well-rounded. So it's not like TCFD that focuses on climate change. So it encompasses the economic aspects, social, and then the governance aspects. So it's all encompassing, and then it crosses across various industries. Like I said, the TCFD for now mostly focuses on financial sectors, but GRI covers almost all industries and is the most widely used one. And then we have the SASB. So SASB is the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, and it focuses on ESG issues expected to have financial material impacts. So the SASB focuses on materiality issues that have financial impacts, while GRI focuses on materiality issues in general. And then GRI has a lot to do with stakeholder engagement. So just like what you all just did recently, where you did a stakeholder analysis. So from there, you do your materiality assessment. It engages stakeholders. But for SASB, it's more like financial materiality. And then SASB is like industry specific, cuts across, I think, over 77 industries. And then it's mostly used a lot in the financial sector, but it has wide use across other industries as well. Even half of the S&P 500 companies now, more than half of them use SASB. So these are the three most popular ones. But now, after COP26, there was a need for uniformity, like I said, in reporting. Uniformity is important because you have different standards. This person's sustainability reports is this way, although there are lots of times where people use two standards, they merge 2 or 3. So after COP26, the FIRS decided that we need something that is uniform and all-encompassing. So the ISSB, that's the International Sustainability Standards Board, was initiated and is currently in development stage, and it will be something that is uniform and cuts across all industries. And it mostly focuses its foundational principles uses the concept of TCFD. So that's why I said TCFD is my personal favorite, because it is futuristic. So it focuses on governance, strategy, risk management, the metrics and targets. So the ISSB would follow that line, but rather than just focus on climate change, it would try to capture other aspects from GRI, SASB, and other standards available. So that's what we have for reporting. Benjamin will continue from here.
Hi, thank you, Kate, for this session. Without further ado, we would like to jump into Q&A. Oh, before that, Henry?
Yeah.
Over to you.
Okay, so I think I would like to say a few things before I jump into this. So while Kate was giving us a rundown as to some of the standards, I'd like to say that those standards are what we used, to develop our process. And, we saw ahead that there was need for uniformity. So for example, if you pick TCFID, for example, it's focused on climate change, right? But we believe at Climatr that ESG or sustainability is not just about being environmentally responsible. It also has to make economic sense for the business. It also has to address the social problems we're facing. And it also has to address the governance decadence we're seeing in companies, right? So we wanted something very holistic, something very robust. So we decided to, draw insight from different, standards that cuts across these three major pillars of sustainability, and then come up with something. So yeah, we use GRI, SASB, and to develop our process and the likes, right? So Ben, can you move on to the next slide, please? Okay, yeah, so yeah, we put this here just to give us some insight as to how, the process looks like. So, for example, the startup we worked on that has this is in the technology and communication sector, and then the industry basically software and IT. So we picked this one specifically because we wanted to also make folks on the call understand that when we talk about ESG, ESG is not just relative to your typical recycling company or your typical sustainable packaging company or whatnot. I mean, it also costs down across a tech company, a traditional tech company, a traditional fintech company, a tech company, ag tech company. There is something for everyone to do. You can find your angle. You can find how you can, direct your business, how you can also position your business as a responsible company. Essentially, what we are doing, what we are looking to do, or what we are, our long-term vision is to, empower organizations to, find their own, to position themselves in the, green economy, and find a way to make sure that their business is a responsible one, and across ESG. So we looked at different areas. So try to assess the materiality rate, try to understand the different issues at hand. So if you look at here, this screenshot you're seeing here was focused more on the environmental side of things. So it was also categorized under energy management issue. So from the analysis, we found out that this particular issue is likely to be a material risk for more than 50% of the industries in this particular sector, right? And on an industry level, is also likely to be a material issue for companies in the industry. So this was, something that we needed to pay critical attention to, energy management, especially as relative to the environmental sustainability, right? So what we found out was, what you could see is that a lot of companies, they claim to be, I hear them a lot say, no, we're a software company, we don't harm the environment. They don't see that aspect. But by the time you help them understand and see how the server that powers their software, the source for the energy that powers the server, or whichever the energy source basically might not be a green one. So let's say you're consuming 50,000 liters of diesel, for example, to power the power centers, that supplies power to the servers that powers your software. You're burning 50,000 diesel for every month, for example. Times that by 365 days. Times that by 12 months, and then that gives you an overview of how much diesel you've burned. By the time you run an analysis to understand the carbon footprint of that very engagement, you see how you, even as a so-called software company, has been able to, impact or contribute to the risks of climate change we are currently facing, right? So we help them to see things from that perspective, to understand that, yes, you can't afford to exclude yourself from this conversation because you think you're a software company and you're not impacting the environment. This is how you're impacting the environment. And if we do a critical research, if we look down deep, we also see how this particular climatic catastrophe is going to also affect and impact your business down to your bottom line at the end of the day. So these are some of the, the the perspective will help business leaders to really see. So at the end of the day, if you look at on the right-hand side, you see where we have the accounting metrics, that helps us to, these are the metrics we've been able to identify, that helps us to properly quantify how the organization is performing over time. So Ben, you can move on to the next slide, please. So that was for the environmental side of things. Now this is a snapshot to give us an idea of how, one of the identified risks for this company was for when it comes to, social sustainability as well. So one of that major issue was data security. So here in Nigeria, we had some issues a couple of months back where, companies were sued as a result of data breach. I mean, this is a global something. It's a global phenomenon. Companies get sued excessively for a breach in their data information and the like. So we try to ensure that companies that this is a material risk, especially for software companies, most of them, this is a material issue for them. They have to be able to, build into their framework or the business model processes that allows them to, ensure that they are responsible for the, data of, their customers, right? In order to avoid those, the backlash this brings. So most of these companies were fined. A lot of them lost, they lost a majority of their customers as a result. I mean, these are things that could affect the sustainability of your business. Remember that the idea or the goal we're gunning for is to really build a business that can last the test of time. Is to build a business that is compliant across environmental risks, that is compliant across social risks, that is also compliant, compliant across governance risks. At the end of the day, we want to be able to support and build frameworks for companies that allows them to sustainably, build, for the long term. So that's the ideology around the social side of things. So I mean, when we did the analysis, we also found that it was also a huge risk for sectors, for companies in the sector, and on an industry level, also a major risk for them as well. And then you also have the accounting metrics fight to actively ensure that companies are able to monitor and measure their social, how they're performing across these data security risks. Benjamin, to the next slide. So then this is on the governance aspect. So one of the interesting risk factor we identified there was competitive behavior. So it covers social issues that are associated with existence of monopolies, which is a thing we see a lot in the corporate world. Excessive, they include, factors such as excessive prices, poor quality of service and inefficiencies and whatnot, and price fixing and manipulation, protection of patents and, intellectual property. I mean, this is a thing for most software companies. And we also, at the end of the day, were able to, identify metrics that they can monitor and measure as an organization in order to show how they are performing across this very material issue as well. Ben, over to the next slide, please. Can you move on to the next slide, please? Hello, can you hear me, Ben?
I think we might have lost.
Hello, Ben, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I'm here. Sorry about
Please move on to the next slide, please.
Okay. Yeah, so we're in the Q&A session now. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, Henry. And I want to believe we will have quite a couple of questions. But yes, perhaps Henry, we can start off with one of the questions we have in the chat box from Piranto, and he's asking.
Yeah, you go.
Hello, Henry, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, please. Go.
Yes. So he's asking, are the metrics universal or company specific?
Oh, yeah. So primarily they are company specific, but for the sake of having a standardized reporting metric, right? It also generic. So this is just as a result of us pulling the metric points from the different standards we work with. So, but primarily the goal is to make it company specific, not even industry specific, company specific. So, because if you want to go the route of being generic, you find out that some metrics are not applicable to your company as a result of how your model works, right? So primarily it's for us to make it company specific because this is what really matters, and I also add that let's not be too bent on, it's not really just about the standard, it's about ensuring that the standard works for you. It's primarily for you as a company to be able to report what matters to you as a company than it is for the standards, right? So that's the concept of the mindset that I'd like to live with business people here. So it's a risk management tool for you as a company. It's about ensuring that your company, your business is secure across board when it comes to ESG, right? So again, it's company specific, but also has it's easily integrated into whatever standards that you would be reporting with at the end of the day.
Right. Thank you for sharing, Henry. If anyone has questions, feel free to put in the chat box or on mute so that we can hear from you.
Yes, please. If you have questions, let's shoot them our way, and we'll try to address that as quickly as we can.
And maybe not just only on module 4, right? Maybe for the past 1, 2, 3 modules, right? So this is the last session. So if there's anything at all we are not clear on. Okay, Faustus.
Well, for now, I don't have any question to ask, but I don't know. It will be more engaging if you could be interactions, you can ask so many questions and then get some feedback immediately, and then you can also at least do some preparations and stuff to better understand this to the details.
Sorry, Ben, did you get a question? Did you get the comment?
Not really, though. I didn't really get it. The network is.
Sorry.
Wow. What about now? Is it clear now?
Okay, yeah. Let's go.
It's clear. I said for now, I don't have any question to ask, but then I will suggest that if it is possible, maybe I can have one-on-one discussion with one of you to better understand certain things, raise some questions, whereby you can give me immediate answers, and it can be like a discussion forum between you and one of you. Then I can understand.
Okay. I think I get you now. Were you available for the last module 3?
Yeah, I was there, but then the network was disturbed.
Oh,
so
okay.
I was
I see. Sure, we can catch a course sometime to discuss what you're building and how we can plug into what you do. So yeah, I'm sure Benjamin would leave you email address. We can easily have a conversation there and then find the time to talk. Right.
Okay,
so that's not a problem.
That would be great.
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Victor's hand is up. Yeah.
Yes, let's have Victor.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Victor.
Well, yeah, I have a list of concerns here. Some may be questions, while some may be maybe observations. And that's when you consider the ESG at a tech company level. So I want to look at materiality issues and issues with energy, for instance, especially the use of fossil fuel in case there are issues with power supply. Then I also had issues with equipment use, the laptop, the phones, and will the company need to look deep down into the production channel and see if there are issues with human rights deprivation, especially in terms of mining and some other issues. Although that will have to do with the IT company that produced those equipment and see how they've been able to put in place ESG concerns that make sure to the exploration level of the materials, there are no issues with human rights deprivation, like child labor and the likes. Then I also want to look at waste management concerns of the company. Tech companies are very rich company; they can afford to always go and get food in, in plastics and just litter their offices and the likes, and they are not looking at waste concerns. Then remuneration that has to do with some will look at payment in foreign currencies. Are there issues with governance? Will the government of the day want them to be paid in foreign currencies? I know there are issues with payments too that has always been back and forth, like government is getting at them, and how do we look at ESG and consider all this? Then I also looked at social issues too, at work. Are there no human rights deprivation? Especially when you consider some tech companies that if you consider their remuneration with their colleagues abroad, that they do the same job and even increase their own job at local level here. Are there no deprivation in terms of remuneration, and also the issues with female having to put themselves down to get some things from them. Then also considering I looked at standards, the metrics, the standards, SGRI and likes. I don't know local Nigeria now. I'm from Nigeria. I know this is global. I don't know local standardization MDAs that is looking at ESG, and or are there some pockets that look at different sections of the ESG? Then as well, looking at ISO, is there no ISO standardization for ESG that even if it's going to pick some parts and maybe some could be encompassing? So these are my quick. Then I also need a personal session. I am looking at a PhD topic that looked at ESG and a focus on recycling in the country or foreign-owned industries. How to explore how much they are putting ESG. So I will need some metrics that is very specific to be able to make objectives that are measurable. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Victor. That was a mouthful, but yeah, I got quite the crux of what you are trying to communicate across. And yeah, so let me start with the issue of local standardization and the likes. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, there's a lot of standards. You'd be surprised that over 1,000. There should be up to 1,000 standards on the global scale when it comes to ESG conversation, across board. And what that has resulted is that we have different people using different standards to try to communicate on their position on ESG. So that has created a problem because let's say a stakeholder, let's say, for example, an investor who has built their processes up with, let's say, IRIS Plus standard, IRIS Plus framework, for example, or even SASB, because investors used to use that a lot. and you as a startup, you're using a different standards to report, you see that there's a disconnect between what you're reporting and what the investors or stakeholders want to really see, as relative to their own, framework. So that has become a problem. So when it comes to local standards, I don't know any of such at the moment. In fact, most companies here, we are relying on other foreign standards, in order to improve on our reporting, right? But I don't know of any local standards in the Nigerian context, as far as I can tell. And so what we've tried to do to address this is we look at the stakeholders. So it has to be something, you have to be speaking the language that the stakeholders want to, listen to. And also, you also have to speak the language that will ensure that internally for the companies, that their process or their ESG roadmap is robust to help them ensure they are looking at all these different dimensions you mentioned about, from the social side to the governance to the environmental and all the likes. You have a robust system that allows them to capture those information internally. So, for example, we are in the VC space. We understand how the VC space works. We understand what they look out for, and those of them looking to tier towards, impact investing. Let me not use that word, or they want to also ensure that they are investing responsibly. One of the things that they care about is to, like I said earlier on the beginning of the module, that most investors, from what we've observed and seen in the market, is that they use ESG as a framework for risk management. So it's a risk management tool for them, essentially, right? So we looked at which standard do they really helps them to really make financial sense or assess the financial risk of a potential company they're looking to invest in. So SAS became the top of the list, and we use that to develop our process, right? So at the end of the day, what that means is by the time we'll be reporting to investors, in this case, you would be reporting what they would like to see, or what they essentially typically would be looking out for, right? So if you look at other, so right now, all the standards we have, there are some, in fact, like Kate walked us through, when she walked us through some of the standards we had there. Some of the standards are just focused, they are pillar focused. So for example, some of the standards are focused entirely on environmental issues. Some are focused more on social issues, while some are focused more on governance issues. So that becomes a disparity. So while we have some tool that tries to capture the three pillars essentially, right? So in terms of looking for a local standard, you might not be able to find some, but what we are going to do for is to work with as many Nigerian companies as we can, and to use a process that it's about, these are new conversations, especially in the African continent, and in a lot is also new across different geographies. So by the time we catch up with these movements, by the time we catch up with ensuring that companies are being ESG compliant, a standard that becomes a norm in this specific region will become something. So for example, like Kate mentioned, a lot of countries are already tilting towards TCFID because of it has, most of the companies or most of the organizations you find in those regions, they are using it. That's what they're familiar with, right? So that's one of the things we can, really look at here and also assess. So
Mary, I want to add a bit to that. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go on, Kate.
Okay. Yeah, all right. So regarding local sustainability standards, so I think we have something quite close to them. It's not like a standard per se, but it's a guideline from the Nigerian Exchange Group. They have their sustainability disclosure guidelines, where we have performance indicators, and then we have like key thematic areas focused on governance, social and environmental and economic aspects. So they have guidelines that they put there for people to follow, but like Henry said, it's actually still boils around principles from the GRI, which they implemented in creating their own guidelines, as well as they took some principles from the UNPRI. So I think in Nigeria, I would say that's the closest to home we have, but it's not really a standard per se, but it's a guideline to follow for the Nigerian context.
Yes, thank you, Kate, for that input. So I hope this sort of, answered some of the questions you raised. And then for regarding the session, please, Benjamin will drop our email addresses. You can easily reach out us. You can easily reach us on so that we can find a time that works to have that conversation.
Absolutely, I will do that. I will do that. And also to add to everything Area Kate has said, the thing about standards is, it's a fairly new concept, so we are not, it is not particularly wise to try to reinvent the wheel at this stage. So we would rather seek to sort of improve on what is already available to make it very tailored to the African context, right? And this is a challenge a lot of ESG or sustainability analysts are having a problem trying to do, right? So there's the international standards, and then there's the process that makes it very unique to the African business, to African startups. That is where Climatr entirely comes in. So
Exactly.
It's entirely uniform and unique to fit our local markets here and local trends.
Exactly. Sorry, thank you, Ben. I just missed on that part. So this is the truth. We've seen even the ISO standards, like there's a disconnect. Most of these standards were not developed for the African space. Why some of them at least you could find is relatable, right? But we believe that Africa at the end of the day needs to come up with its own, standard that works for it. So that's why on our approach, we don't like to follow a generalistic or a generic approach in our process, right? So we want to ensure that at the end of the day, we have something that is tailored to the company. So we just focus on key fundamental, focal points, which is we pay attention to the business itself. The goal at the end of the day is not really to be able to report on standards, but basically to be able to, ensure that the company is future-proof across ESG conversation, right? Then at the end, secondly, we also try to assess what are the matters or what are some of the concerns, stakeholders, or what is the norms for the different stakeholder groups. So if you're working with startups, they will need money. They will need to work with investors. So you need to fulfill the requirements from an investor part. From the supplier side of things, so depending on the business, we'll look for a standard that is very specific and unique, or that is more robust across the different stakeholder groups, and then use that to create something, standardized at the end of the day. So we have something we're working on. It's a long-term plan for us to also be able to standardize our own process. Although already what we're doing is to leverage the different standards we've mentioned, SASB, GRI, and the likes to, do that. You can also report with those standards we have there. But at the end of the day, we're looking to do this, to take this on a longer term to ensure that we are creating something very unique, something that is also uniform, across board. I think we have other people raising their hands. We have Aziz raising their hand, and we have Zach Brian that asked a question on the chat.
Yes, let's quickly have Aziz, and then we'll treat Zach's question.
Okay.
Okay, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes,
please. Yes, please.
Okay, in one of my former companies, it was a manufacturing company, so they are doing business with a multinational. Now, as a cost for the business is that they have to subscribe to their sustainability initiative. In this case, they have to do what we call the sustainable palm oil supply chain. So they have to get the company enrolled in an EcoVadis rating platform, and they have to be taking the rating. Now, the issue with this is in the supply chain, what they want exactly is because the company is just using the raw material, the oil, to make multinational end up buying. The company is not involved in the production of this, but they want the company to say the supply chain is certified by RSPO, that is standardized. They meet some certain criteria. So it was a difficult scenario because the company is small, but the companies producing this palm oil are big companies and all that. So the question is, as an organization that has to subscribe to some of these sustainability initiatives, how do you influence the supply chain to make sure that you can get them to subscribe to this standard so that you can continue doing business with this multinational. That is number one. The other question is this. As part of the EcoVadis assessment, because I was involved in that, most of the questions we have to do with are you aligned with United Nations Global Compact? Are you this? Are you subscribed to the RSQ? That's Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. All of these things cost money. The company has to pay money to say they are members or they subscribe to this and all that. So the cost of those subscription to those standards, that's implication on the company. How does a company that is just new, a manufacturing for like 2 years, how do you expect them to cope with this cost and still be able to meet their sustainability drive so that they can satisfy or meet the requirements of their multinational clients?
Thank you, Aziz. Very, very good question indeed. And so I'll start with the last one. This is the problem, and I want to assume the company in question. This is a Nigerian company. Is that correct? I mean, this is a local company.
That's correct.
So now you have cases where these standards are way expensive, and in fact, you have to pay in foreign currency. Why? The reason being that these standards was never developed here for Africans or even in Africa, right? So it's a foreign organization that's developed this, and you have to pay in dollars or euros depending on where the standard is coming from, and you just have to pay. So this is one of the problems we are having in the ecosystem, right? We don't have standards that are tailored down for us here, and we don't have much of that. I believe there are a few here and there, but most likely they've not yet grown in popularity, to become a household name and the likes or whatnot. But the point is, in terms of that cost factors, this becomes a major issue we're facing, a major challenge we're facing, right? And most times, these standards were not really developed or designed for, small businesses, which might have this intention of, ensuring that their supply chain is entirely green. So back to your first question, I'll just have to, touch base on both questions because I think they are related. I will tell you for sure that when it comes to being a responsible business, is not just for the sake of reporting to your stakeholders, but it's also something that is a core part of your business model. It's something that is a core part of the vision, the purpose of the company, right? So what that means is once the visionaries or the leaders of the company has made this, hey, this is we must have to do this. We must have to work to ensure that we are running a sustainable business across environmental, social, and governance. It's a commitment. It's no longer a case of, hey, we're just doing this in order to, fulfill our righteousness, or we're just doing this in order to report to some certain stakeholders or whatnot. So we've made this in such a way that it becomes important for us to make it a critical part of the business. And doing this avoids what we call greenwashing. It avoids companies that, they're just saying things. This is when you now really find out companies that are really dedicated to making this work or not. So what happens in this case becomes that startups or business owners, for example, they are not, in your first question, they are not directly related to the manufacturing of those stores. And when it comes to sustainability, it's about leadership in this space. So it's not just, for example, some of the things we mentioned now was just specific or directly directed to the company or directed to a specific startup. It's more of a lot of it is internal, design. So once we are done with that aspect, the second stage would be to see how you pass that across your supply chain, across your entire supply chain, to make sure they are airtight as well, right? Then there are different stages to being, a responsible company. It's not just how to ensure that internally things are okay. It also boils down to how to push that across your supply chain. So one of the ways that we can advise you can, encourage your supply chain to do this is to ensure that from the get-go, they are part of the process, like we explained. And it takes a whole lot of, educating to make them see the need for it. So it's more about, hey, we are trying to build an ecosystem that is robust and is protected across any form of risks that could come to affect us 10 years, 20 years, 15 years in the future, right? as a result of any of these issues across environment, social governance. So this is what we're trying to do to build a strong and coherent ecosystem to ensure we outlive any of these risks. Right. So it takes a lot of back and forth, a lot of collaboration. It's not something you have to do on your own. So that's why we started with that stakeholder engagement. So if from the onset at some point, even though you're working on making sure that internally you're okay, you also contact and engage with your suppliers and stakeholders. What that does, what we've seen that do is it helps them to begin to question and also, ask questions. It also helps them to begin to think about these things. So by the time you come to a point where it becomes a mandatory something for them to do, they have to do it. But another trend we are seeing is that you as a business owner, if you have a supplier that is not compliant, this is where you need to look for suppliers that are compliant. So I will tell you for sure, you're not just the only company that's also thinking of being sustainable. We have suppliers across different sectors that also, that's a core part of what they do. So what we're doing at the end of the day is to merge together with those that can make this whole journey easier for us. So if you have a supplier that is bent on not doing anything around it, which is affecting your own reporting and also affecting your relationship with your clients, you have to look for another supplier that is at least flexible enough to accommodate your requests and your need. That's how we've seen this work so far. Benjamin, I don't know if you have something to add to this as well, or Kate.
Yes, I do. Yeah, so like Henry said, it goes down to the supply chain. It's not just about your company being compliant. And then remember in Module 2, we did say that sustainability, ESG is not just about risk management. There's also the aspect of opportunity, harnessing opportunities. So you have to make those people down your supply chain, the companies down your supply chain, you have to make them also see the benefits that they stand to gain in terms of opportunity creation. So for instance, I know of a company that in the FMCG space that person is like a supplier. And then he said he was mandated by a company he was supplying to get that EcoVadis standard he mentioned. So because of that, because he has that already, he was able to get access to other bigger organizations that require that standard. So imagine them looking for a supplier that different ranges of supplier, then they find out that okay, amongst the suppliers bidding for the contract or whatnot, this particular person has the EcoVadis standard, so he'll be selected. So that's the opportunity aspect. So it's boils down to awareness creation, educating them, and making them see the importance of integrating sustainability into their business as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kate, for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on, Ben.
And just to wrap up with that, they've said it all. They really said it all. But just to round off, one thing you can do is, yes, you want to be, maybe for lack of a better word, bullish about sustainability, like really pioneer it in your space or in the business space. There's also the part of being persuasive. Persuasive doesn't mean that, again, your supply chain actors are already making money, so they can as well do without ESG and maybe cut off relationships with you to take on engagement with somebody else. So one very peculiar thing to do, or very pivotal thing to do, is to make sure that you are getting it right internally. And that alone is a gospel in itself. It's a message to your stakeholders to be like, or to your supply chain guys to be like, oh, this guy has really figured it out. These are the improvements over time. These are the progresses he has made over time. And so having to persuade them would be a lot easier, right? Yeah, so again, internal positioning is most critical, right? That's why we are very peculiar about how we go about ESG integration. It must be it must be well done. It must be neatly done so that your entire business can exude sustainability, can speak sustainability, and anybody will be like, okay, how do we join the bandwagon? Right.
Exactly. And just to add to this, that's why if you remember one of the process we talked about developing ESG policy and objectives. So by the time you're able to understand what is important for you, for your business, you're able to create policies. I think at some point in one of the modules, we showed you the sustainability framework of one of the startups we worked with. So there they had policies for each of their stakeholder groups. So what that means, that's kind of guided their operation. So they won't go and be looking to work with any supplier that is not aligned, right, with their policy and objectives. So again, to ensure that you are not enforcing that like in a harsh way or in a way that they might not really, or in a way that didn't give them enough time to think about what you're proposing. We've ensured that from the get-go, that you've identified them as a stakeholder, relevant stakeholder to engage with, and then carry them along in the process. And most times what we've seen is that we end up not just working for this, the particular company in question. We end up working for different suppliers that are interested in also ensuring that they're also compliant, right? So that makes it easier, you know, at the end of the day. So I think that we've said enough on that aspect. I hope that answered your question.
Let's quickly deal with the next two questions since we've overshot on time already.
Yes, please. So for Zach, what are the charges for ESG assessment for staff? Okay, so I mean, this is something we can engage with. I think I'm sure you registered for the course. Would reach out to you at some point to have this conversation. I mean, for every of the startups that or for every of the businesses on this training that are interested in furthering this conversation around ESG integration, we can have that conversation and then figure out how to make this work. So we'll reach out to you in a short while. And Ben, which one is the next question?
The one by Mokhtar. How and when will the certificate be issued?
Oh, yeah. So, okay. So yeah, it will be issued after the last session. I think Monday is the last session. Monday is the last session where we just, I think Ben will tell us more on the logistics of that. But Monday is the last session. Then after that, would each receive a certificate of participation, you know, via our emails, right? So that's how this would happen. And
yes. So speaking about next week's session, of course, this is the end of the modules. So next week is more of a celebratory event where we get to, you know, catch up quite informally, as well as share some potential next steps, right? Especially with regards to the discussions we've been having with our partners, TechBridge Invest and Bridges for Enterprise, which involves, you know, having post-program engagements like ESG focused webinars and panel discussions, right? ESG focused workshops, right? For people that are really looking to delve into this space, right? Yeah, so we're going to discuss a lot more on that next week. And yes, we would either share your certificates before next week Monday or after the celebratory event. But yes, we'll look forward to see you next week Monday. Discuss more.
okay, everyone. I think that will be all. And thank you once more for joining in. And I will look forward to see you next week Monday.